All right. So now the next thing that we went over on Wednesday was, how to start figuring out what sizing your columns should be. All right. So now one of the things that I want to talk about is, thinking about copy text, right? There's a lot of rules that go into copy text. Not so much, larger text that we're working on, whether it's titles, subtitles, or anything of that nature, but within text itself, right? Within a paragraph form, that's the text that we want to discuss. Now, let me bring in my character. Move this out of the way. So what we got is our type size. So right now I'm using 10-point text, okay? The other thing is, let's turn off hyphenation whenever possible. So in your paragraph, you're going to deselect hyphenate. So we have this. Let's select everything. All right. And figure out what the width is going to be. But before that, look at the leading here, right? So for a comfortable read, when we're laying out text, is going to be 120% of whatever the type size is going to be. Now, the comfortable reading is going to be right around that 60, 65, but really anything between 50 and 75 characters per line. You could definitely, depending on the typeface, go well beyond that. You may be right around 80 or 85. But it's going to depend on a number of factors, the way the type was developed and how the relationship between each of the individual glyphs are forming the actual words, but also the X height. Now, I briefly discussed how we read information. We don't actually, read each individual word, or we don't scan like this continuous going all the way through. Instead, we kind of jump across the line, and it's very sporadic, right? So if we're looking at this line right here, we may read to here and here, and then we skip over of and the, and then our brain is going to fill in the blanks as we rapidly run across that line. So if we mess up, or rather mess with that comfortable readability, we get frustrated, right? So if we end up having something that is super long all the way across the page, as we get to the end, we're going to have a tough time figuring out and backtracking the way we were, right? Because we went so far, and then which is why whenever you would write a term paper and have to print it out, you would increase your leading. So this way it's easier for the eye to get to the end of this line, and you have a nice gap in there to know where the next line is going to be, all right? The same is true for anything that is super narrow. If we end up having these narrow columns, because think about how we're reading across, we're skipping across these words. We skip and then get to the end, skip and get to the end. Very frustrating, right? So there is this little Goldilocks of a width that you want to hit, all right? Now, as we increase the type size, this is going to increase. So this way, if this is a 10 and 120% is 12, we're going to go to 11 points, and it's going to be 13.2. All right, if we go down to 9, then we're going to be 10.8. All right, so this is always changing, which means this also has to change. Depending on what type size we use here is going to determine how wide this is going to be. All right, so if we keep everything at 10, let's just use 10 for what we're working on right now. What I want you to do is the width of this is to double it, okay? So if this is going to be 10 points, make it 20. So what you do is you have this text box, come up to the width, type in, make sure you select the IN as well, and go 20 PICA for pica, all right? That right there is the middle of what you want to be, okay? You can go as far as 2.5 and as little as 1.5, all right? But generally, this is a good starting point. It doesn't always mean that it's going to stay here, right? So if we hit this, and you can see this is overlapping. So we're going to have to break it down a little bit less if we want to have these two sitting side by side, okay? I'm wondering why. Oh, because I changed the page size to like 7.5, because this really should fit on 8 by 10. All right, so I'm gonna basically select this. I'm gonna drop this down 3.25 and a little bit more. All right. So once you figure out what your column width is going to be, then you can start actually setting everything up. All right. Now with the abstract here, it was only one paragraph. For these three here, it's going to be three columns rather. All right. So this sits here, and this is going to sit here. All right. So we have our 4 columns going all the way across our page. This here is one section, and then this is one sitting all by itself. Now, what you have happening in the middle, that's a gutter between the 2 columns, okay? Now, the rule is you want to make sure that the spacing between these 2 columns is greater than the spacing between your paragraphs. Now, you do not need to have a full return for a new paragraph. You can have this come up and then do a nice little tab to indicate a new paragraph. But you do need to give some indication that a new paragraph is happening. Now, if you want to have baseline alignment, which means your text across the entire 2 pages, the spread, you can see right there, that line runs all the way across for the baseline all the way across. So imagine if you had a line paper and that line paper going across this is going to be perfectly right there, right? So if we drop this line down, you can see all the way across, these are going to be sitting right on that baseline, okay? So that is one of the grids that you can utilize in your layouts. Now, let's say you don't really care about baseline alignment, right? And you end up saying, you know what, I don't like having this huge gap because maybe I want to have this sitting as close as I can, right? So this is what I really want to happen for this. So that means you cannot have this much of a space here. And you really hate tabs, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to remove these spaces that indicate a new paragraph. And then in here, you're going to then use this option right here, right? It has a little box sitting on top. If we increase it by 1, you can see it gave a little bit of a space, just enough to show as you're reading that there's a gap. And then you can see that it indicates there is a new paragraph that's starting and that's ending. So with that, you can then use this and then lay out your 2 columns working that way. Now, when you end up working this, you need to still make sure that your columns are going to line up, right? So if I end up making this a little smaller, and see how it lines up perfectly, right? Because I have this sitting there and that sitting there. But if I end up removing that extra space, like this, and I bring a couple of those in, so now there's only 1/2 space there. Let me make sure that this is the same. So, oops. All right. So if I sit here and I move this up and I want to align everything there, you can see right now it's not going to happen, all right? Because right here, this isn't quite hitting, but this is sitting at the bottom. I need to have these line up. You do not want this sitting down here and then letting that be. Because if I come up to hide my frame edges, that looks terrible. Okay, so you need to make sure that those 2 line up perfectly. What you can do is select these 2 columns, hit Command B to bring up your text frame options. Now, if I hit preview, I'll show you. So the align is by default. If we do justify, it's going to stretch that text out to align to the bottom and to the top. So this way, then it's nice and clean and aligned perfectly. You can only use this option if you're using a half right here. Like I'm not using like a full return to indicate a new paragraph is happening. Because let's say if I was doing it that way, let's do Let's make it 0. I'm going to make a new column. All right. So right here, so we have one missing, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to hit Command B, and then I'm going to hit the align and go justify. When I do that, because I'm adding a new line there, it's going to throw off my baseline alignment. See, so now that's not lining up properly. So you can only use that option if you're not using baseline alignment for a grid system. All right. All right. Done. And then, all right. So we talked about left align. There's a couple different alignment options we got going on. So right here, we have left, and then we have center, which you're not going to ever use. You have right. Sometimes if you're going to have a pull quote, maybe you end up utilizing right alignment. And then you have justified. You have 4 options over here, right? If you hit this, you can see I got to move this out of the way a bit. All right. When you have this selected and you have this, then the bottom line is going to sit to the left, right? So you can see this right here on the left. If you choose the next one, that bottom line is going to sit in the middle. If you choose the right one, it's going to sit to the right. If you choose a last option, sometimes it stretches your text all the way across, right? That is not good. And it's going to be an issue if you try and utilize this. So if you end up liking the justify type, this is the one you're going to end up using all the way across. Now, some of the things that you have to watch out for are huge gaps that open up in your text, right? So as we're working through, you can kind of see there's a little bit of opening here happening, not so bad. You know, right here is a little bit of an issue, but right here is a huge issue, right? You're creating rivers in your actual type. So that's a problem. The other thing you want to watch out for is when your text gets super slammed together, which kind of like right there is happening. Right here is happening. You can see that spacing is just pushing everything in, all right? There are times that your text as a justified type is not going to work, all right? I will say if you do really enjoy having the justified type, then you're probably going to end up always utilizing, you know, a single column. So then we're going to be somewhere around 25 pica for a column, all right? Because then the more characters you have per line, the less issues you have that's going to arise with the more narrow columns, all right? The other thing you're going to need to do if you use justified type is utilize optical margin alignment. So right in here, what you're seeing is as you come through, you can see there's a comma right here, there's a comma right there. Let me draw a guide so you can see. So right here, you can see the comma gets pushed in, right? We want that to be pushed out. So what you do is with this selected, I'm going to hit margin, optical margin alignment, and it's going to push everything on the outside. So now you can see it allows the text to be a little bit more flush, and it pushes all of that punctuation on the outside. Now, by default, it's set to 12 points because if you just start typing out, just like in Word or any other word processing program, it starts off at 12 points. 12 is huge. And hopefully with the homework assignment that you're working on, you'll see why you almost never want to use 12 points. You need to adjust this. So as you adjust and bring it down to 10, it's not going to be much of an issue if there's nothing happening. But if you end up increasing, you can see that things start moving around. All right. So you always want to select the typeface size and have that apply here for you. So this way then it keeps everything a little bit more contained. All right. So that's how you would set that up. We talked about, let's put this back to left. We talked about watching out for widows and orphans. All right. So let me get a orphan over here. All right. I'm just going to pretend this is the end of the thing. All right. So you want to avoid this, right? You don't want just one word sitting all by itself. You want to avoid having this, right? So if this is all coming together and you have all of these working together, you don't want one sentence sitting all by itself. The same is you don't want let's get, of course it's going to do that now, right? All right, you don't want one whole sentence sitting there. Actually, let me bring back that text. Bring this over. I'm going to bring this up to there. All right, you don't want one sentence sitting all by itself. All right, you always want to make sure that you end up having two sitting there, or you have everything coming in together over here. All right. This way, you don't end up having any stragglers sitting all alone away from the rest of its text. The other thing that I covered is this right here is only for copy text. All right. When you end up having larger type, so let's bring this in. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. All right, and let me do this to illustrate a bit more. All right, so we have this, and you can see everything is lining up like so. If we end up using alignment over here, it's going to shove that to the left. All right, because what it's doing is trying to create everything super straight all the way down. Now this may work for smaller text that's sitting in here and pushing that text T out just a little bit, right? You can see right here, if we zoom in, you can see that it kind of goes just on the outside because it's an optical illusion. If that was sitting in there and the cross stroke was even, it would end up looking like it was kind of sitting too far in. So it kind of allows it to kind of sit on the outside for smaller text. It doesn't work with larger text, okay? So you need to watch out for using this and having it apply to larger type. So only use the optical margin alignment for your smaller copy text in the paragraph form. All right. I think that was it. I think, yeah. So that's what was covered on last Wednesday before Halloween. All right. So next, I'm going to go over everything that we covered yesterday, and then you'll have that to reference as well. All right.